Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. You're watching TechStrong TV, and today is Thursday, May 7th. Thanks for joining us. I don't know if this is the first time you've watched TechStrong TV or you've caught some of the shows before, but we hope you're coming back because you like what you saw and what you heard. And we have some great new stuff and some old stuff to show you today. As usual, before we get started, a couple of reminders. TechStrong Con is June 4th. If you go to TechStrongCon.com, you can sign up for free, but slots are limited. We're announcing some new speakers. I'll give you a preview if you're listening. We've just gotten Chenzi Wang and Rich Mogul from the cybersecurity world. Emmett Keefe III, the man behind the Insight Ignite and Reignite series and principal partner at Insight, will be presenting. And a few others that are already on there. William Hurley, John Willis. There's more than I can shake a stick at there. Cornelia Davis, Andrew Clay Schaefer. There's got to be a dozen and a half. And that's just on the main stage. Sanjeev Sharma, principal analyst at ASG, will also be presenting. That's on the main stage. There's a whole separate track as well. There's exhibit booths. There's live chats and discussions. Check out TechStrongCon.com for full details. Also, if you're watching this on TechStrong TV, there is a live chat integrated. You can chat out to the team here. Sometimes some of the speakers are on that chat as well. And we also have a companion Slack channel at TechStrongTV.slack.com. You can get an invite from that just by joining at TechStrong.tv. But no matter where you're watching this on, whether it's one of the Roku, Apple TV, or Amazon channels, or the DevOps.com mobile channel, or the websites, Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, thanks for joining us. Let me tell you a little bit about our show today. First of all, speaking of Insight partners, I had a chance to speak with another principal at Insight, Thomas Crane. Thomas is probably the youngest principal at Insight. He serves on a number of boards in the DevOps and cyber portfolio there. And, Insight just announced a $9.5 billion, that's with a B, $9.5 billion new fund. I think they already had, I forget if it was 15 or $25 billion under management and investments. And, their portfolio, especially in the DevOps, DevSecOps, digital transformation, cyber portfolio areas, pretty extensive. A lot of the companies that we deal with, and you probably use their tools, are Insight-funded companies. Anyway, Thomas is going to talk to us a little bit about, they've got $9.5 billion to invest. The world's in kind of a shelter in place. What does that mean? What's the outlook for startups, venture-backed startups, and how's the VC community looking at the present circumstances as an investment opportunity, a time to retrench, or what? So Thomas will give us some insight there. No pun intended. After that, I had a good chance to catch up with Richard Lee, who is the CEO of DataWire. And it's funny, I know Richard, as it turns out, and he reminded me from several of his prior companies before becoming CEO at DataWire. And it's good to see, I think in 4 or 5 years now, Richard's really done a great job over there. DataWire, open source commercial versions as well, really plays a lot in the Kubernetes API gateway space. And they've just come out with an integration into the Signal Science WAF, next-gen WAF, which is one of the more advanced WAFs out there. Richard's going to talk to us about that a little bit and what's going on in the whole microservices mesh world. And then I've got something old for you to play. It's not that old. It's from this past end of February, early March, from our DevSecOps Days, DevOps Connect DevSecOps Days event at the RSA conference in San Francisco. And it features one of my favorite speakers on DevSecOps. I think, frankly, he doesn't get enough credit. He does an amazing job with his presentations. He does an even better job at Comcast. It's Larry Machiarone. Larry is going to talk to us about leading with the transformational power of trust. As I said, it is recorded from our DevSecOps event at RSA conference. I think it was also replayed on our DevSecOps virtual event in March. But it's an excellent presentation. If you haven't seen it, highly, highly recommend it. I'll be back after that with the news, and then we're going to turn things over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has Todd Weber, CTO Americas at Octave, and then Rachel Stockton, Senior Director. I'm not quite sure of her company, but she's going to be talking about the psychology of passwords, which is pretty interesting stuff. Then after that, we are heading things over to Mitchell at the Analyst Corner, and Mitchell has some interesting things. I remember now the Charlene interview. Rachel Stockton is a Senior Director Product Marketing at LogMeIn. So these are the people behind GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting, and stuff like that, as well as LogMeIn. And of course, passwords are very, very important to them. Anyway, Mitchell's going to have his Analyst Corner as usual, and then it's Thursday, so it's time for Mike Vizard to give us his channel roundup and sage words of advice. Always good to hear from Mike. And then I'll be back to wrap things up. Sounds like another full show here. Look forward to having you join us. I hope you enjoy it. We're going to take a quick commercial break right now, and we'll be right back.
Tech is strong. We may be working from home, but tech goes on. Tech will continue to collaborate. Tech will continue to communicate. Tech is strong. Join us for TechStrong Con, June 4th, 12 hours strong, Tech Strong. Featuring John Bacha-Galupe Willis, Shannon Leeks, William Hurley, Jasmine James, Kat Swatell, Cornelia Davis, James Wickett, Courtney Kistler, Damon Edwards. Live Q&A with speakers, exhibit halls, and more. Free, but register before spots fill at techstrongcon.com.
Okay, back here in the studio. As I mentioned, our first segment today is with my friend Thomas Crane. First met Thomas, I guess 3 years ago. Tom is a rather young fellow, lives in Brooklyn, New York, went to UPenn, and he, as he informed me when we were recording this segment, he's recently been made a principal at Insight Partners, which is pretty amazing. He's the youngest principal ever there. Insight is a large VC private equity firm. They invest in a lot of companies in DevOps and cyber. Prior to this, Thomas was a VP. He started at Insight right out of UPenn as an intern, and really just a great Horatio Alger story of working hard, getting rewarded, and climbing up the ladder. So good for Thomas. Insight recently closed a $9.8 or $9.5 billion round, something like that, $9+ billion. Huge round, a huge fund that they will be, of course, investing in this space. And Thomas talks to us about what's the outlook right now for venture-backed startups. What's the strategy? Are they retrenching? Are they spending? Are they kind of running in place, holding pattern? And how are VCs looking at this? Are they reevaluating valuations? Are they looking to expand investment, pull back? Thomas gives us the view at Insight, or the insight at Insight, we might say. And I think you'll find this one interesting.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Our next guest is my friend Thomas Crane from Insight Partners, Insight Venture. Thomas, welcome. How are you?
Thanks, Alan. Great to be here. Doing well. Dialing to you from one of the COVID capitals of the world, I guess, New York City. So
I think it's the COVID capital of the world, unfortunately. But it is what it is. Thomas, the last time we spoke, I don't know if it was one of the JFrog events or another KubeCon or Swamp Up, and you were at the time a VP there. And now you inform me you're now a principal at Insight.
Yeah, I think one of Insight's youngest. Just speaks to the upward mobility. I mean, they really trust us to kind of go out there and be the tip of the spear for our investment team. So it's been a great experience, a great ride so far.
Well, it has, and I mean, you and I know each other and speak. I know the companies you're involved with. There are many of the companies that are kind of everyday participants here on DevOps.com and Security Boulevard and so forth. I know you don't have a lot of time, so if you don't mind, I'm going to jump right into things. Thomas, this has got to be, even though you're a principal and you've been through a bunch of investments and exits and, investing, I don't think you've ever lived through anything like we're going through right now. I'm much older than you, and I haven't. So, what do you think? How is this kind of influencing your outlook?
Well, look, I mean, we're fortunate to be, backing companies that are relatively resilient to the whole macro situation. I mean, software as an asset class, but specifically my team where we focus in DevOps and infrastructure and cybersecurity, of course, which is one of the few areas where budgets just aren't being cut. But I will say, there is an air of uncertainty. And while Q1 generally was pretty solid for most of our companies, and a lot of that just coming off the inertia of, strong economy before that, I think there is a fair amount of uncertainty for Q2 and whether this is going to be a U or a V or something else in terms of the recovery. That being said, I would say I'm maybe it's because I wasn't a venture capitalist in 2008, but I would say we're definitely inclined to be leaning into things a little bit more aggressively. And I think if I look to Mark Benioff and some of the quotes he had about what he did with his business in 2009. I know to this day he regrets slowing down hiring and reducing sales capacity back then. I think there could be some good lessons to learn from all of that.
Absolutely. And you and I were talking off camera, and we actually hit on this area. This is the time, I think, where new leaders are born. And not only individuals, I mean corporations and products. So I don't think it's a good time to kind of bury your head in the sand and try to hoard your resources. But Thomas, look, you're a VC, you probably get it from enough people. Is this a time where you guys are maybe saying, wait a second, all of a sudden the rabbit's got the gun, right? In the last couple of years, companies have been dictating what many may seem as astronomical valuations that you had to pony up to, and now it gives you turnabout's fair play. Do you think we'll see valuations kind of swing the other way, or do you think they'll stay up where they were?
No, look, I mean, we are growth-oriented investors, and like any growth investor, we look to companies and their forward 12-month forecast as an important indicator for what valuation makes sense. And I think the degree to which companies can bound the uncertainty with what 2020 looks like, the less impact there will be on valuation. In fact, I have a couple companies that new investment prospects and companies that I work with, which have had, a neutral or even positive impact from all of this. And, they're not seeing any discounts in their valuation. So sure. From that perspective, it's just a smattering. But of course, the less uncertainty, the better from a valuation perspective. But, there will be companies that are impacted.
Great. Let me ask you another question. I'm sorry, rapid fire questions, Thomas, but I know we got time here. Time issues here. So next, how is this changing sort of the mix of the kinds of technology? Like me personally, I wouldn't be investing in much commercial real estate or maybe VPN technology, firewalls on-prem kind of stuff, anything on-prem from an infrastructure point of view. Has that translated to kind of what you guys are looking at, or are you still just casting a wide net?
I mean, I look to one of the founders that I work closely with, the founder and CEO of Recorded Future, Christopher Ahlberg. He has a great tweet. Companies were planning for years to do their digital transformation, and it happened overnight, right? And so every single they're in the threat intel world. Every single security protocol was just changed. No more firewalls, DLP, network monitoring. And look, I mean, I think the other fact is a lot of folks that unfortunately have been put out of work as a result of this are potentially leaning toward alternative sources of income, including criminal activity and hacking, which actually is a pretty, it lends itself well to a remote work type of environment. And so from that
You don't see
perspective,
you don't see many offices for the criminals. You're right.
Exactly. So I think from that perspective, we're just being mindful of, SaaS, obviously SaaS dominates, and that's fortunately, the vast majority of our portfolio, and security and infrastructure, DevOps, that can all be delivered in a remote work way. And look, there are companies like in remote desktop, there are companies in kind of next gen VPN, so more kind of this idea of more granular controls and the software defined perimeter that are seeing tailwinds as a result of this, and it makes sense.
I agree with you 100%. So Thomas, another kind of, and I actually have seen this, because I went through the dot-com bubble and the dot-com bubble burst, and then of course 08 and 09, the recession. There are a lot of people getting laid off, and a lot of babies get thrown out with the bathwater. There's a lot of really good, skilled, talented people that are available. And instead of cutting headcount, right, this may not be a bad time to add headcount if you could add, the kinds of skills that, quite frankly, you weren't able to add 3 months ago, 2 months ago. I'm wondering if you're seeing that.
Look, we always say the assets of our companies are not. It's not our copy, or it's not our IP and our copyrights or whatever it is. It's really the people that go up and down the elevators. And if we can find, use this as an opportunity to find great talent and access to great talent that otherwise wouldn't have been there, that's as much of an opportunity as anything right now. And I think generally, it's easier to say, be bold and invest, in the trough of the curve or whatever it is. But I think for the companies that are bold and actually take advantage of it, they're going to be well positioned coming out of this. And I think, we don't want to be too myopic about it. At the same time, you can't grow if you don't have cash. So there is sort of a mindset of, have planned for the worst, but hopefully you can execute for the best.
Absolutely. So Thomas, a lot of people think, actually, I don't know if a lot of people think we're going to have a V-shaped recovery here. I think a lot of people are thinking more of a gradual sloped recovery. But on the other hand, I mean, knock wood, in the tech world, we live in a bubble where I don't think we've really felt anything the way the general population has. But what do you think? Are we just maybe seeing a delayed kind of reaction in tech, and come Q3 and Q4 it could get ugly? Or do you think, we'll ride this through and continue trending up or recovering, whatever you want to call it?
There's going to be a smattering of different results, and I think you saw it in some of the earnings reports that came out for public tech stocks, which are really buoying the overall economy right now, or at least the stock market, I should say. And I think it's confusing, right? For a lot of people out there, they look at the stock market and then they look at the GDP slowdown and the jobless claims, and they don't know how to reconcile it. And I think largely it is a tale of two cities, I guess, if you will. But I think the other aspect is the uncertainty is going to drive consolidation. And for us, we are big believers in an organic growth as an important driver for our companies and as an opportunity for our companies. And I think framing this as not as an exit, and it's not like you're admitting defeat, but an opportunity to actually be a part of something bigger that can then go and hopefully have a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of outcome long term. And look, that's the beauty of our asset class. I mean, we just announced earlier this month that we had closed a new fund. Private equity is pretty resilient in terms of just our immunity to macro shocks, and as a result, coming to our companies and being part of a 5 to 8 year kind of outlook, there is a lot of stability in that, and I think it's a pretty attractive proposition for companies that might not have gotten to the critical scale needed to weather the storm. And I think you'll see this a lot too in the economy. There are companies that are going to be well positioned and that already are well positioned. I mean, look at some of the cloud companies and what the growth that's being driven there as a result of all of this. Of course, those that can't innovate out of this and that can't find a path to kind of, companies that are tethered to real estate, et cetera, like it's going to be a tough road ahead.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Thomas, I'm going to ask you to address maybe a class of people that are watching this, and that is maybe some folks laid off, maybe some people who have had a great idea for a company and are saying, hey, now's a great time to do it, right? This is the time I'm going to put together my business plan. I want to found, because I think we could change the world somehow, right? Because I've never met an entrepreneur who didn't think what they were doing can somehow change the world who was successful. If you're not changing the world, don't bother. But that being said, what would you say to them? Hey, like right now, over these next couple months, what should they be doing so that, by the summer, by fall, maybe an insight or someone, they get on your radar?
Yeah, look, right now, our companies are focused primarily on innovation and on their customers. And I think, you look at the stories like Uber and Airbnb and these amazing companies that were forged in, the 2008 and 2009 timeframe. There's a similar opportunity here. And, a lot of VCs, I think, have rightfully been kind of parodied for, our doors are open, but, secretly they're not doing deals. We've been very active, and I think, it's part of our view of just building long-term great companies that we're going to continue to lean into new investments. I think in September, October timeframe, I wouldn't be surprised if we're kind of back to more of a stable, just kind of run rate in terms of new deal activity. I will say I look back at what happened to our own investment pace back in the 2008, 2009 timeframe, and while it did slow down a little bit, our first 5 investments coming out of the curve were some of our best at that vintage. So I think it's informative to look at, coming out of the curve, some of the best companies and investments are likely to happen.
I agree with you. I think now is the time to innovate. Now is the time to try new things. I don't care whether it's a startup, a fresh startup, a venture-backed, company that's already venture-backed, or even a public company. Now's a great time to pull out the stops and see what sticks out there. If
you are in that privileged position that you can raise kind of insurance capital, call it right now at a reasonable valuation, I think some of our companies are thinking that's, not a bad idea. And we're seeing kind of investment conversations come about that way as well.
I was interviewing the CEO of it's kind of a roll-up in the DevOps space, newly renamed, and we'll leave it at that. And they were saying that the word they got from their PE, backer or investor was, hey, right now cash is king. Go out and find 5 or 6 more companies to roll in here, right? Because they're going to. Cash is king. Maybe you can get a favorable deal on it from companies who maybe don't have the cash to maybe see through a short term. Or we're looking for an exit anyway, frankly. What do you think about that strategy? You advising companies to be on the lookout, your portfolio companies to be on the lookout for potential acquisitions?
Look, we're always big believers in M&A. I think, again, because we have a longer term outlook and our view is, once you build critical scale, that creates scarcity value. That just means you'll be able to command more of a market premium at an exit. That value prop to a smaller company that the road of an exit or the road to liquidity might not be as straightforward if you're not kind of at that critical mass. It actually makes sense to kind of, get onto a bigger platform. I definitely think now with the uncertainty, it's probably a potentially more attractive value prop, and we are looking for those opportunities. But I think it's important not to be opportunistic. These companies need to make sense together in a way that the products need to tie together in an intelligent way that makes sense to the market. So while we're always
lesson I learned.
You could take 2 pounds of crap, or you could have 5 pounds of crap, but at the end of the day, it's crap.
We try to avoid that.
I hear you. Anyway, Thomas, I want to be respectful of your time. We're at the top of the hour. And so first of all, hey, man, thanks for coming on. It's good to see you. It's good to see you healthy and well. Stay that way. And I hope we can see you at a conference in person soon, for all of our sakes.
Alan, thanks so much. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully in person very soon.
Absolutely. Thomas Crane, principal at Insight Partners. Hey, man, Thomas, thanks a lot. Congratulations. This is Alan Schimmel on TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
I got the burgers. I went to Bun Barn, Beef Patty Palace, Tomato Town.
Oh, thanks for getting all this, honey.
No problem. Getting all of it just took about 2 hours.
I just wish there was an easier way to get all your burger fixings from one place, you know?
Well,
Dad, you didn't go to Mayo King?
you know our car doesn't fit in their drive-thru. I went to Mustard Chef.
I hate this burger.
He also went to ketchup.
When you're building something using components that don't work together easily, things could get ugly, fast. You wouldn't live like this, so don't make your DevOps team live like this.
This lack of burger cohesion is hard on all of us, Cheryl.
GitLab is the only single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle.
Back now for our second segment of the day. And this one is with Richard Lee. He's the CEO of DataWire. And again, on my entrepreneurial theme for today, you heard from Thomas, startups, what's going on. Richard is a gentleman I first met in the DevOps spaces 6 years ago, maybe more, 5 years ago. And, he went from working for some of the better DevOps companies to becoming the CEO of his own company, DataWire. And they pursued, sort of that classic open source, DevOps open source business model where you have an open source project with enterprise functionality on top of it. And they've really been doing great things at DataWire. They play in security, service mesh, microservices, Kubernetes. They recently came out with a new integration for their Ambassador Edge product line that integrates into the Signal Sciences next-gen WAF. Now, Signal Sciences WAF is probably industry leading technology, and there's a powerful combination now of taking a next-gen WAF and marrying it with a Kubernetes API gateway to enhance the capability of what you're doing there. If you're into DevSecOps, if you're into Kubernetes and container and cloud native security, I think you'll find this really interesting. So here's my interview with Richard Lee, CEO of DataWire.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this next session here on TechStrong TV. Our guest today is Richard Lee, who is the CEO of DataWise, and he's going to talk to us about a new Ambassador Edge Stack integration. Richard, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thanks for having me, Alan.
It's a pleasure. So Richard, as we were talking off camera, you've been in the security industry a while, worked with some fairly popular, successful security companies, and you're now the CEO of DataWise, correct?
That's right. Yep. So, Alan, I've been working in security for about 10 years, and then about 5 years ago, I left the security space and wanted to move into the DevOps space to start DataWire. Just got a little too tired of all the parties at RSA, and I decided to try to find a new set of parties to go to.
So first of all, I apologize. I think I said DataWise and not DataWire. Let me make it clear. It's Richard Lee from DataWire. But, Richard, not dissimilar to my own journey, right? Where actually about 7-8 years ago, I came under the influence of DevOps, but because I was doing it because I thought it was the best thing for security, truth be told. But I also found a lot of good parties in the DevOps space as well, back when we used to go to parties anyway. Yeah. So Rich, I don't know if we've ever introduced our audience to DataWire, though. Why don't you give us a little background?
Yeah, so we started about 5 years ago, focused around microservices and Kubernetes. So our view was that there was a new wave of application architecture coming called microservices. We felt that Kubernetes was the foundation of that. And as we looked at that space, we thought, wow, there's a lot of things that are really changing around how you actually build these cloud native applications with microservices and Kubernetes. And so we started to explore and build infrastructure software to help organizations accelerate their adoption of cloud native technologies. So, you know, a few years later, here we are. We've got thousands of customers around the world. We're open source, and we also have a thriving commercial business where some of the open source users decide they want commercial support or additional value from our enterprise edition.
And that's more the rule than the exception, right? In the cloud native world, in this new world, I call it the democratization of IT, Richard, right? Where people are choosing with their wallets, their feet, and their fingers, open source solutions, and it's not from selling it down from the CIO down, it's from the engineers up, who you get the software in their hands, and if they like it, they decide this is great, but I do need an enterprise class solution. I do need enterprise class support. I do want more feature sets than maybe just the open source version comes with, and it's become, for a long time, right, Richard, you're in this business a long time, people were like, well, Red Hat's the only open source company that's been successful. Well, certainly we've seen a whole trainload of companies following what I call this democratization of IT model to great success. So that's great. But it sounds like you, like me, got pulled back into the security piece of it as well, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because one of the things that we found is that as organizations started adopting microservices and Kubernetes, and they started moving more and more workloads into production, one of the questions they had very naturally was, okay, this is all great. It's faster. I can see that I'm saving money. What about security, right? So, and so if you look at both our open source and our enterprise product, one of the key differences between the products is the enterprise product has security features that are not available in our open source edition. And that's one of the key reasons, key drivers of our commercial business.
Sure. So, and I'm not here to second guess you, Richard, but why isn't there more security in the open source edition?
Well, so there is security in the open source edition. I think the key for us in the enterprise edition is security really requires you to integrate with a lot of other pieces of software in your ecosystem. So if you want to build your own authentication system, for example, in our open source, you're more than welcome to do that. And we have companies that do that. If you want to actually integrate with Active Directory in a secure way, you can also write your own code to do that. But we found that by and large, enterprises prefer for us to do that because it's just not their core competency. So,
makes sense.
So we actually provide security updates for free to both our open source and enterprise editions on the same SLA. We provide TLS security, a whole host of security features, but really in those integrations, those are where our enterprise edition really, where we make a lot of investment in the enterprise edition. And that's also where Signal Sciences is part of that story now today too.
Yep. So let's jump into actually it was yesterday's story. You put out the press release yesterday that you guys have done some integration work with the Signal Science Next Gen WAF with the Ambassador Edge Stack. So let's start off. What is the Ambassador Edge Stack, Richard?
So the Ambassador Edge Stack is a Kubernetes native API gateway. So when you're in Kubernetes, you typically these days deploy your application as a set of microservices that you expose on the internet. And so the API gateway is a central point where all your traffic flows through the API gateway before it sends it onto your services. So it's a very natural point for controlling network access to your services. And so we include things like authentication and rate limiting, and now with Signal Sciences, a state-of-the-art web application firewall integration.
Excellent. Now, so I see the obvious reason to integrate with a WAF. Why Signal Sciences?
Well, honestly, we're a big fan of their technology. The founders know a lot about the pros and perils of past web application firewalls. And the other thing is our customer base has been asking for it. So we have a large cohort of enterprise customers that overlap with Signal Sciences enterprise customer base. And so our enterprise customers really asked us to do a strong integration because they're moving to Kubernetes and also want a state-of-the-art WAF.
Makes good sense. So, yeah, in my day, I've done a few integrations and OEM and partner deals and channel deals and so forth. Talk to me about now how is this being put out to market? If you already have a Signal Sciences WAF, you could add the Ambassador Edge stack, or is it the other way around, or you got to buy them concurrently? What's the deal here?
Yeah, so it's a business and technology partnership. So existing Signal Sciences customers, if they're migrating to Kubernetes, they now have a great option for an API gateway, because pretty much with every single Kubernetes deployment, you do need an API gateway. And so if you're a Signal Sciences customer and you've decided to move to Kubernetes, Ambassador now provides a Kubernetes native API gateway that you can use with Signal Sciences. Flip side is, if you are an existing Ambassador Edge Stack user and you need a web application firewall, well, Signal Sciences provides a state-of-the-art firewall that you can also use. And the configuration of this is just really easy. So there's a very simple configuration file that is integrated into Ambassador, and then you use the Signal Sciences Cloud Dashboard to actually manage your web application firewall.
Fantastic. Good stuff. In terms of the go-to-market, is there are the sales teams and sales engineers and marketing collateral sort of together here? Or it's just, hey, you're one of our customers, you know what? You want to use a WAF, check out the Signal Science one, and vice versa. When Signal Science, has a big customer base, people say, hey, we're moving or we're adopting a Kubernetes stack. We really need that API gateway. And Signal Science says, perfect. We have the data wire connection for that for you, and it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's really a partnership that we're just launching. We've got our marketing teams connected, our product teams are connected, our engineering teams have worked together, and over time, I expect that relationship to expand. We're really focusing on a small number of initial enterprise customers, making them successful, testing it, and using that to drive case studies and broader adoption and awareness in the Kubernetes web application firewall market.
Makes sense. So, Richard, let me, you probably don't know the answer to this, but what percentage of Signal Science WAF or customers do you think are running Kubernetes?
I don't know specifically. What we see is that Kubernetes adoption is growing in every single customer segment, right? So whether you're a small startup to large enterprise to a particular team within a medium-sized business, we're seeing just massive Kubernetes adoption. And so even if today it's not a huge percentage of Signal Sciences business, I'm very confident to say that over the next year or two, it's going to grow very rapidly.
Excellent. Well, yeah, we of course see this all over, right? Kubernetes, the Kubernetes adoption curve is just, probably. So I lived through, and you did too, Richard, the adoption curve around hypervisors, right? Early 2000s, and then by 2005 with the cloud took off. I would venture to say that Kubernetes adoption is light years faster than even the hypervisor adoption, which by itself seemed like it was overnight. Everyone was running virtual.
Alan, I think you're exactly right. I think that what has been surprising to me about Kubernetes isn't so much that the hot young startups have been really aggressive around adopting Kubernetes, but a lot of our customers are really what I consider to be not exactly the most state-of-the-art IT organizations. We have customers who are power operators, right, and banks and organizations that you typically associate with more conservative technology choices, and they're really actually being pretty aggressive around their Kubernetes rollout. One of my favorites is actually a state prison system actually runs Kubernetes and our software. So you never knew that a prison system would run state-of-the-art Kubernetes.
Yeah, a whole new kind of mesh. But Richard, when you think about it, that's not unlike DevOps itself, right? When I think back to when I first launched DevOps.com, and there used to be these huge kind of philosophical arguments around, well, is DevOps for enterprises or is it for startups, right? And is there a difference between DevOps at the startup versus DevOps at the enterprise? And, who would adopt it? Is it a unicorn thing, or is it, for the horses, as Gene Kim had said? And, clearly, my 6+ years of running DevOps.com, Richard, I've learned that everyone adopts DevOps. Old school, Her Majesty's Tax Service and the South African Revenue Service and banks and fintechs like mad are, it's DevOps or die for them in order to remain competitive. So I think we're seeing the same thing with Kubernetes, and I would add and ask you about this, with this whole COVID thing. I think we're seeing an increased push. Hey, we've got to do our digital transformation fast because this thing is the new normal, and we've got to be able to empower people to work remotely. We've got to move faster. We've got to be cheaper. We've got to be up in the cloud. And if you're going to move to the cloud, don't move to the 2005 cloud. Move to the stack that's ruling today, no?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we see that, obviously COVID is a very serious situation affecting everyone on the planet. And but what we can say is that our customers, they're still moving forward with all their projects because, in fact, some of those projects have actually accelerated simply because they see them actually as strategic to enabling the business to really thrive in this kind of environment.
Oh, I agree. And again, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, Richard, right? And I think companies that were already on Kubernetes or in the process of moving to Kubernetes are accelerating, even during this craziness. Their people are able to work more. They're recognizing their business goals. Where companies, I think, who were maybe talking about doing it 2 years from now or didn't really have definitive plans are kind of stuck in the cement, right? And they can't innovate. It's hard enough for those companies to innovate when everyone is in the office. It's near impossible to innovate when everyone's working remote, and they don't really have that kind of infrastructure to support that, right? And it's not that they have bad IT people. They're not running a infrastructure and technology stack that scales in this kind of environment.
Right.
And it could be lethal to them, right? Because if they don't change quickly, Richard, the gap's going to widen to the point where you got to ask if they're actually going to be in are they in survival mode? I saw J. Crew, I think, bankruptcy today or yesterday. It's there's going to be a lot of that.
Yeah, I think the survivors are going to be the ones that adapt and embrace the distributed development, cloud native, cloud first approach to developing software and managing their business. So, yeah,
but to your point, companies that are doing that can't forget about security either. They've got to integrate security. They've got to use tools like an Ambassador Edge Stack for that. As you mentioned, everyone who's running Kubernetes in the cloud like that needs to have that API gateway, and you've got to secure it. And the tools like the Signal Science WAF, Next Gen WAF, and I realize this is the partnership you're announcing, but there are other WAFs, but they got to use something. Is my point, right?
Yeah, I think that's right, Alan. And I think one of the things that we're finding is that because the cloud and Kubernetes to a lot of organizations is so new, really focusing around something that's easy to use and maps to Kubernetes is one of the key criteria that organizations are looking at from their platform solution, from a WAF, or from an API gateway. And I think that's one of the things that we spend a lot of energy around is just making sure that Ambassador, along with Signal Science, is as easy to use as possible. Because even if it's very, very powerful, if it's not easy to use, generates a lot of false positives, a lot of false negatives, then you might as well not really be using it. So, so that's a big focus for us.
Yep. Richard, we're coming out of time, and I realize we didn't even tell people where to go get this, how to find out more information, download an open source version of the DataWire product. Where can they go?
So just come to our website. It's getambassador.io. So
getambassador.io.
Yep, very easy.
Very cool. All right. Richard Lee, CEO for DataWire. Thanks for being our guest on TechStrong TV here. We want you to stay well and have you back on the show maybe in a couple weeks.
All right. Thank you, Alan.
All right. Richard Lee, DataWire. Ambassador Edge Stack now integrated with the Signal Science Next Gen WAF, and you can check that out at getambassador.io. Right, Richard?
Exactly. Thanks, Alan.
Perfect. All right. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Okay, back here in the studio. As I mentioned, our Something Old for today comes to us from our RSA DevOps Connect DevSecOps Days event. Recently held in San Francisco around February 24th, actually. The segment I'm going to show you now is Larry Machiarone, Marcaroni from Comcast. Frankly, Larry doesn't get enough credit. He just does an amazing job of presenting. He's also doing an amazing job with the Comcast folks. This is the presentation. And it really talks about, DevSecOps initiatives to get development teams to make certain mindset shifts and adopt security practices. Well, how do you get that done? It's easier said than done, obviously, and collaboration and mutual trust are key to it. Larry dives into this. I think you're going to find it very interesting. Anytime you can catch a presentation from Larry, I'd highly, highly recommend it. So here's Larry Machiarone from Comcast.
So I'm going to start off with this quote to sort of set the stage. Only 21% of companies believe that their organization has the right processes, collaboration, trust to actually accomplish this collaboration between development and ops and security. And so trust is a big element of pulling this off, and very few companies feel like they have enough trust between them. So tell me if this sounds familiar to you. The engineering department, well, Ross said it earlier if you were in the room, the security group says, hey, those engineers, they're just putting crap out there. That's going to get us hacked. We can't trust them, right? And then the engineers are like, well, the security people don't understand all of the other things we have going on, and that our success as a company, it depends on us being able to ship features, and I can't steal all my velocity to do these things that you're asking. And most of them don't even make sense in our environment, or we don't understand them well enough for them to make sense, possibly, is what's going on there. So that's what this talk is about, is how you as leaders can get over that hump and actually establish trust between security and engineering. Before I get too much into that, let me give you a little bit about my background. Graduated from Virginia Tech with an electrical computer engineering degree. Any Hokies in the room? No Hokies. Oh, get out of here. That's UVA. Who was that? Oh, okay. I'll keep an eye on you as we go. So Virginia Tech, Virginia, UVA, big rivalry school. So that's what he shouted out there. I started my first business while I was still an undergrad there, doing factory floor automation, process controls. We wrote software that did turbine power generation controls. So we were actually in the chain of about 60% of the world's power generation. If there were vulnerabilities in our software, the bad guys could exploit it and possibly bring down the world's power grid. So we got really good at producing software that was essentially vulnerability free. Carnegie Mellon got wind of this idea and this concept, invited me, actually helped me sell out my business interests and go to Carnegie Mellon. And the reason I left my business to go to Carnegie Mellon is that they offered me an opportunity to essentially change the world with this idea of building security in. And so we launched the Build Security In initiative at Carnegie Mellon. Myself, my now CISO at Comcast, Nupur Davis, and a gentleman from industry named Gary McGraw. And we fundamentally failed. We fundamentally failed to change developer behavior. Our concept was that developers needed to take ownership of the problem, and we were too early to the game. The security folks were not going to let it go. They had the budget. They didn't trust the engineers, and the engineers just, they're like, we have a lot else on our plate. We're not going to pick that up. So it really went nowhere. I left Carnegie Mellon, went to go work for Rally Software. And the reason I did that is that I realized that the Agile transformation movement sort of posed the opportunity to actually make this possibly happen. And then along came DevOps following the Agile movement. And DevOps is the perfect fertile ground for our message of getting developers to take ownership. So that's how I got to where I am now. Nupur got the CISO job at Comcast and said, hey, let's give it another shot, except this time under the moniker of DevSecOps, and that's where we are. And it's been no holding back, as Alan said this morning. This movement went from almost nothing a few years ago to where it is now, and that's essentially the same time that I started at Comcast to now. I do want to mention that I'm also an active developer. I'm the primary author of a dozen open source projects, one of which gets 400,000 downloads a month. So I have instant credibility with developers. I believe it's really important that if you're going to be telling developers what to do, you actually have to be doing it, and you have to be doing it recently and not have done it 5 years ago, because things have changed a lot since then. And so I feel that's an important aspect of my story, is that I have that developer background. So this is the fundamental problem. Bolt-on security, doing security after the fact, thinking that you can sprinkle pixie dust on a product that was built without security in mind, and suddenly it'll be secure. Put boundary protections around it, and it'll be secure. This is the concept that we've had for years. Was never really very effective, first of all, because a lot of the incidents are application related, and that's getting more and more true. And as you start to move faster and faster with DevOps, it becomes impossible to do these bolt-on activities. So there's the tension. This is the big problem that people are realizing is happening in organizations. And then, of course, as we mentioned, there's this huge lack of trust. You're never going to get the development team to sort of learn from the security folks, and the security folks to sort of adapt their approach for the engineering team if they don't trust each other. And so this talk is essentially a way you can get over that hump. I have this thing I call the trust algorithm. And the trust algorithm is essentially, for DevSecOps, is essentially my concept, my ideas, but the base formula actually comes from a gentleman named Charles Green, and he has a website called Trusted Advisor, a consulting business called Trusted Advisor, and I learned this years ago without connecting it to Charles, and then I started talking more about it, and Charles reached out to me and said, hey, you know that's my stuff. I said, I knew it wasn't mine, I just didn't know where it came from. So Charles is on board with me continuing to use this as long as I give him this credit for it. We're going to go through each of the terms of the trust algorithm here one at a time so you sort of understand it. But overall, trust is credibility plus reliability plus empathy, all in the numerator, and then divided by, in the denominator, apparent self-interest. And so by putting the thing in the denominator, if it's large, then that makes the overall equation low. So you want that thing in the denominator to be as minimal as possible. So that makes trust as big as possible. And you want the stuff in the numerator to be as big as possible. Denominator low as possible, numerator big as possible. We're trying to maximize the things in the numerator, minimize the thing in the denominator. So credibility is essentially, do you know what you're talking about? Can you go in and can you actually convince folks that you are an expert in this and that they should listen to you because you know what you're talking about? This is very difficult to do for security folks in general. They struggle with this. They don't have the experience that the engineering folks have with producing products. And so they're constantly sort of using different terminology. They're constantly sort of saying things that, conceptually are great if you're going to bolt on security, but don't work if you really want to build it in. And so they're sort of a little off. And the engineers sort of realize, I can snow these guys, or I can tell them what they want to hear and make them go away, and that's the path of least resistance. It's too hard to get them to change their policies. It's too hard to convince them that they're wrong. I'm just going to, go the path of least resistance and get past this engagement. So what I like to do instead of having security people go in and meet with engineering teams is I like to have engineers go in and meet with engineering teams about security. And Jasmine sort of has that background, has that engineering background, but she's here speaking. Her role is not security primarily. She's speaking here at a DevSecOps conference from that perspective. Ross is a very similar sort of perspective as well this morning. I really do think that this is the key to pulling this off. If you are thinking of launching a DevSecOps transformation program, I would start by finding the 10 most highly respected engineers in your organization, getting them to come to a meeting by bribery or forcing their boss to talk to the president or some way, get them to come to a meeting, sell them on this vision, sell them that you want to take this different approach and get one of them to lead it. And you'll never push it out throughout the engineering organization without their buy-in. And if you're from the security space, which most of you are, then you're going to need that person essentially partnered with you, if not leading it, in order to pull it off. And then you can teach them whatever they need to know about security. Now, granted, good, talented engineers are worried about security, as Jennifer was saying this morning. They want to do the right thing, and they know that producing secure products is part of that. So some of them have become great students of security and actually have thought about this deeply and know it, but a lot of them don't, and so you might have to bring them up to speed on some stuff. But don't try to convert them to be security specialists. Just teach them sort of the ideas and the concepts and the frameworks, but let them adapt it to their mindset and the mindset of other engineers. That is sort of the key. The other thing that's key is that this staff, this DevSecOps transformation staff that you're putting together, has to continue to write code. You can't say, okay, you're now no longer a coder, you're now a coach, a DevSecOps transformation coach or a security coach, or you're now paid out of the security budget, of course, but you still get to write code every day. And this is sometimes hard to pull off. You have to think of the role as toolsmithing to a certain degree, and that these folks are not just responsible for for cajoling engineering teams, they're also responsible for making it easy for the engineers to do the right thing. And you do that by creating self-service tools that they can consume. And so this is essentially how you optimize that term in the numerator for credibility. This one slide essentially is my advice on how you maximize that term. The second term is actually pretty easy. It's reliability. It's really how consistently you do what you say you're going to do. And this is my only guidance on this, because this is what security people have consistently done very well in the past. And all good business leaders essentially learn this very early on. Make and meet commitments. If you meet with an engineering team and you tell them, you know, let's get the scanning tools integrated into your pipeline, immediately go back to your desk and get them the licenses for that and send them the link to the instructions so they can configure their pipeline to actually start running these scans. Do it very rapidly, like that day, that moment, right after that meeting. And then follow up and consistently follow up. And if they ask a question or they relay a difficulty, an obstacle, respond very rapidly to them. Not just with, I hear you, but I hear you, we will look into it, and we will get back to you no later than by the end of the day today. That's the sort of thing you need to do in order to establish this pattern of reliability. And then the last term in the numerator is empathy. And this is how well you show them that you get their pain, that you understand what they're going through and the obstacles that they're dealing with. So you do this by essentially, first understanding their perspective. So having an engineer do this is easier than having a security person do this, but you can coach this capability. You can coach this to anyone. It doesn't have to be engineers to do this. But you not only understand where they're coming from, but you will stand up for where they're coming from. You will defend them to the rest of the security organization. Now, the first time I do that for a client, an internal client of ours, they are now my fans forever. They will help me spread throughout the rest of the organization. If I go to bat for them and get an exception, because I really am convinced that they understand the risk and they actually have a way of addressing that risk that doesn't match the mental model of the security people, doesn't match what the policy says, but actually does an effective job of that, they love it. That is a way to show empathy is that you'll defend it. So this quote from Nelson Mandela is also something that I coach to. It's a little obscure when you think about it, when you just read it, I should say. Where you stand depends on where you sit. And the idea here is that you can't really stand up for someone else if you've never sat where they sit, if you've never experienced the pain that they've experienced. So sit with the development teams, literally sit with them. Spend a half a day just sort of going through what they're doing. Ask them to invite you to their planning meeting. Understand their process, understand their perspective. Engage with them about their the use of pull requests and code reviews, et cetera, and try to sort of show that you really get where they're coming from. So it's kind of funny because this morning I was listening to all the other talks, and I realized that like half of the things that are on this slide came out in this morning's session. So this will be sort of a refresher course for you. But this is the most powerful slide in my deck, and I'm going to spoon feed it to you. So wait, I'll pause at the end, see if you want to take a picture. I'll give you a chance to do that. Some of you guys are doing this. By the way, I've uploaded the slides. So wherever they're available from this event, you should be able to download them. So don't worry about taking pictures if you don't want. But first of all, this is a pledge that I have gotten the entire 450-person security organization to sign off on. It took me about a year and a half, and we had to tweak it quite a bit to get this to happen because they pushed back on this to a large degree. And I probably never would have gotten it pulled off if the CISO weren't firmly behind it. But it starts with, we trust you. We trust that, as Jennifer said earlier, you want to do the right thing. And you're aware of what that is, for the most part, in general terms. We also trust that you're closer to the business context, and you will make trade-off decisions. You have authority to make trade-off decisions. We trust that you will make good trade-off decisions, even if that means accepting security risk in order to mitigate some business risk that's more appropriate for your context. There's a really great story of this at Comcast. There was go back 5 years before I started at Comcast, maybe a little longer than that. Everybody realized that cord cutting was going to be very, very, risky for Comcast. We had to bend the curve on cord cutting to give us time to sort of round out our business with some other revenue where we're going to be in bad shape. And so our very visionary CTO came up with this project that we were going to basically revolutionize the user interface of cable set-top boxes. And we did. That product was a X1 box, huge success. It's won 3 Emmy Awards. It's the only user interface to win any Emmy Awards, and we've won 3 Emmy Awards for that user interface. Mostly voice-driven is sort of the key thing that most people sort of get out of it. Very well done voice-driven interface. But when that project was launched, the security people and the ops people were like, well, it's got to scale and you got to meet all these rules. And the CTO realized that if we had to do all that from the start, we would never solve the business problem of coming up with a revolutionary interface for cable set-top boxes. And so they basically gave them permission to forget about all those reliability and scalability and security concerns until they addressed the business risk of bending the curve on cord cutting. And so that was visionary, and that is the sort of thing we want teams to be doing. But we want you to have all the information to make sure those trade-offs are well informed, that they're not just, I don't feel like doing that, that you understand that this is a better investment and this is a lower risk, and you want to make that decision. So we pledge to make sure you have access to all that information so it's well formed. And more importantly, we pledge to do the toolsmithing, to lower the cost and effort so that doing the right thing is the easiest thing to do. And that it's the path of, we try to make it the path of least resistance. And this is our role now, is we are no longer gatekeepers, we're no longer the police, we're no longer the auditors. We are, this is the last little slide up bullet so you can start taking pictures. We're no longer the gatekeepers, rather we're now toolsmiths and advisors, and that is the way we coach our staff to be. It's, somebody comes onto my staff and they have about 3 weeks of sort of saying the wrong thing, so they frequently are like, well, we have to police them, something that makes me think they think we have to police them. And I jump on them politely and privately, and the other teammates correct them. But if they don't get over that hump after about 3 weeks, I'm like, this is not going to work. If you think of our role as policing, you're not going to make it on my team. We have to be the guys they want to reach out to. We cannot be the guys they want to hide from and run from, or we'll never accomplish the vision that we're trying to do. So that leads us to the denominator. The last term, we want to minimize the denominator. That would maximize the trust, and that's apparent self-interest. So how obvious it is to the person you're working with that you're doing this for your own benefit rather than their benefit. You want this to be low. This is never zero. I wouldn't be engaged with the engineering teams if I didn't have a goal of actually changing their behavior. And so this is never zero. So what you want to do is you really want to address this by emphasizing the shared interest rather than your self-interest. And by that, the most obvious one is essentially saying, hey, our reputation will determine our stock price. We all have an ownership in this business. We should all worry about this problem. That's an example of how you emphasize shared interest and get away from self-interest. And you can also do this by basically saying, these are your goals. We know you want to produce excellent products. We're here to help you do that. And excellent products, the definition of that, it includes security. They're your goals. We're trying to help you with your goals. Essentially, that sort of language, saying you, or us, and never saying me. That's definitely the way we want to sort of accomplish this. Let me check my time here. So I have 4 minutes. Yeah. So I've got some more slides that sort of talk about how this plays out in practice at Comcast. I'm going to skip through these pretty quickly. This is my definition of DevOps and DevSecOps. I sort of have a love-hate relationship with the term DevSecOps because I think if you're doing DevOps right, then the security part comes along with it. I think that's, yeah, I see, I was guessing you would nod to that before I looked over, and Jasmine is definitely nodding to that as well. So this is my way of sort of representing that, and it really rings true. We have this progression of maturity from thoughts to words, to actions, to culture for every practice. There's 45 practices in the overall framework, but there's 11 that we focus teams on. So we literally sit down with the engineering team and we walk through this table of 45 things. And you know, we might only get to the first 11. The ones in the upper left corner are the most important ones. And we ask them to assess themselves. Are you at the thoughts level of this? Are you at the words level of this, meaning you're making plans to adopt this practice? Are you at the actions level of this, meaning you've partially adopted this practice? Or is this your culture? Is this the way you essentially always do it? Thoughts to words to actions to culture. And then at the end of this session, we ask them to pick one, maybe two, maybe three things that are not this darkest shade of green to turn one shade of green darker in the next 90 days. And then we track that. We track to see how accurately do this. This is how we coach. We use this framework to coach development teams. They love it. The reaction is very positive. And it's a self-assessment. If they say they're at culture for it, you know, they're not going to lie, we found. They don't want to lie, especially when you have the whole development team in there instead of just one manager. And that's the requirement for these sessions, these facilitated self-sessions. You know, but they get to set the level at whatever they think they are. We help them sort of define what that is to be at culture for that practice and let them ask questions. But then we do this. We also roll this up for management. So this is a view for the whole organization of all 11 practices, and then we trend it over time. This top line goes up here when we find new development teams. The white area goes up when we do a facilitated self-assessment for those teams, and then these green areas go up as they adopt those practices. And so the slopes of those lines are essentially how I tell whether the team, the part of the organization is on the right track or not on the right track. And all of our metrics for our transformation program are geared off of the slope. Primarily this year is geared off of the slope of this culture line, as I'll explain. These are some quotes. You know, I have this sort of pithy thing about the role of security folks changing, but I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna shift gears here real quick and tease my talk on Wednesday a little bit. So it's done in the style of a pulp fiction detective novel, Dick Tracy. And so this is the opening skit. So if you come on Wednesday to this talk, which I'm asking you to come, the whole talk is done in a little pithy sort of style, but this is the opening skit. You'll have to sit through it twice here for this. So imagine Dick Tracy sitting behind his desk. The door opens. Her name was Big Data Analysis. And I knew she was trouble when she walked through my door, but I couldn't send her packing because she was just trying to help me out with my gal, the truth. You see, my gal, the truth, and I, we were going through a bit of a rough patch. I'd recently hooked up with a new crowd named DevSecOps, a well-meaning bunch, but there were a few guys in this crowd named Anecdote and Folklore and Intuition and Consulting Expertise. And my gal, the truth, she wasn't always kind to these guys. So Big Data Analysis, she was going to help me out with this. She was going to show where my new friends were right. But that wasn't going to be good enough for my gal, the truth. She was also going to show where they were wrong. And that's where the trouble began. So stick around and I'll tell you our story. But if you're the type that doesn't like to have your beliefs challenged with data, then you better beat it, kid, because my gal, the truth, she's a beauty, but she ain't always kind. So thank you.
Right now, software is more important than ever. It is powering the online services enabling teams to connect, collaborate, and work remotely, and allowing innovation to continue to get to market rapidly. CloudBees offers software delivery automation solutions to support all remote teams, and you can use the best-in-class tools you need to get the job done. CloudBees helps you build stuff that matters. Visit cloudbees.com to learn more.
Back here now, it's time for the news. Hope you enjoyed our 3 segments so far this morning. As usual with the news, just giving you a kind of quick rundown of some of the headlines. I hope you can check out the articles. But as I always tell you, this is not an exhaustive list. There's a lot more information, articles, and news out there. There's the webinars and stuff. So please do check out Security Boulevard, DevOps.com, Container Journal, if you want to find out more. But a couple headlines over in the Boulevard for today. We have 5 lessons about cybersecurity and COVID, the best laid plans. Certainly we're learning as we go there. And there's a good article that lays out some of the lessons learned, and maybe you could save you an idiot tax, right, by leveraging what other people have already learned and mistakes they've made. Also, we have an article around the census security. You know, the census was recently completed, but how protecting complete cloud systems aids in accuracy. And take a look at that. I think it's a good one. Over on the Container Journal site, we have an article about Anchor, A-N-C-H-O-R-E, if you're not familiar with them, doing great stuff in the kube world. Anchor adds support for Windows containers. And yes, Windows containers are a thing. I think they're going to be bigger as we go on. And then another article, I think we might have mentioned this one, but it's big enough I want to re-mention it. SNCC is partnering with Red Hat on OpenShift security. And again, that was coming out of the recent Red Hat Summit, and SNCC's doing great things all around. Take a look at that one. And then also SkylerDB adds operators for database on Kubernetes. And of course, operators are all the rage in a lot of these programs now, but now SkylerDB's added it as well. Over on DevOps.com, we have DevOps and AI Ops better together. So this is DevOps is an attempt to scale technology with humans, and AI Ops, or is AI Ops the ultimate answer? I'll leave it for you to decide, but you check out the article. And then also we have sacrificing security for speed. The top 5 mistakes businesses make in application development. So, you know, I got to tell you, I disagree with the premise of the article. But one of the things when I started DevOps.com is I wanted to create a big tent for everyone with an opinion and a point of view around DevOps to put that out there, let the community decide. And you be the judge of what you think is truthful, or not that anyone lies, but what you think is correct or incorrect. And, you know, I will tell you that my personal belief is that what we can do with DevOps is we can go fast and be more secure. So it's exactly, we don't sacrifice security for speed. We get security with speed. But, you know, there are other opinions. Read the article and you could check it out. And then we also, you know, GitHub. Look, anyone who thinks GitHub is just a repository is kidding themselves. They just released yet another new slew of tools for developers to use here, and you know they continue marching down that CI/CD space. They want to be an end-to-end DevOps solution, and you know go head to head with GitLab and CloudBees and JFrog and some of these others. Digital.ai, another company in that space. So GitHub just released a bunch of tools, and go check that out. I think it's a worthwhile article for you to take a look at. Also, Second Watch launched DevSecOps or assessment service. And we have a report that finds greater appreciation for observability. So there you have it on DevOps.com. Very busy. You know, this thing with COVID, you would think we'd have less people submitting articles, but we have more people, more articles coming out. So do check out all 3 sites for more. But that's my news roundup headline for today. It's Thursday. We're going to, well, just like every day, we're now going to turn things over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has 2 good interviews today to present to you. So Charlene, take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back everybody to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops. And I am just about to have a great conversation, I'm sure, with Todd Weber, who is the CEO of CTO Americas at Octave Security. Hey, Todd, I almost gave you a job promotion. How are you?
Good. I thought about the after interview for this.
Right, exactly. I didn't want to get you in trouble there. Hey, well, thank you so much for taking a few minutes and talking with me today. Really appreciate it.
No, happy to do it.
So tell me first a little bit about Octave Security.
So Octave is the world's largest cybersecurity SSI or services system integrator. We've been focused on cybersecurity for over 20 years. As a conglomeration between Fishnet and Accuvant and several other companies that have come together. We are solely focused on cybersecurity, and we have about 2,000 cybersecurity experts located primarily in North America, but in other places as well. And we are focused on making our clients' cybersecurity programs more mature and how we can kind of strengthen that curve, to use puns in our COVID world here, and how to help them along their journeys with maturing their security programs.
All right, great. Well, one of the recurring topics that has come up during this this pandemic, this COVID-19 crisis, is the issue of cybersecurity and working from home. And I've spoken with a lot of folks about this particular topic. Everybody has a slightly different point of view, but for the most part, we all agree that it needs to happen, that there needs to be a stronger cybersecurity stance with organizations in helping and ensuring that their employees stay secure even while they're working from home. So kind of want to pick your brain a little bit about some of the security issues that organizations are seeing among their employees now in this this work from home kind of new model of working now, and keeping in mind that a lot of organizations really had no notice to kind of get their employees set up for work from home. So what are some of the risks now that they're kind of dealing with as we're now 5-6 weeks into this. So what are you seeing?
So as you said, many people were caught. We had to do this in an emergency way, and as you said, it's not like we had a choice in the matter. It was either this or nobody works. And, the initial triage function was mainly about how do we just get everybody up and running, and how do we get them to access to resources, that just all from home. And in some cases, that was going to be from corporate devices, and some people were set up well to do that, and then some were not. What it did is it exposed some technology challenges at first, with just how do we get everybody access to everything, and then VPNs were certainly prevalent towards that, and SASE solutions were certainly prevalent, and then multi-factor had to be scaled up because now everybody was remote, and it was a function of not where you are, meaning like, all the controls were, whether you were in the office or out of the office, because everybody was out of the office, and you had to get all the controls in place, or at least minimal sets of controls, but not everybody was even able to do that. So it was, how do you perform alternate access? How many assets do you maybe have to expose directly to the internet that you wouldn't normally expose? Or could you come up with alternate access strategies using VDI or other methods? What we were trying to tell people though is like, please, take risks, because everybody has to take on additional risk during this time, but it was take intelligent risks, understanding what the impacts were. And despite that, I mean, we see signals that, not everybody could do that. For example, like if you look at Shodan, we recommended to people not to open RDP directly to the internet, as that was, a major vector for ransomware, especially for healthcare organizations. That was really exposing them. And, if you look at Shodan, we've seen since March, or I think it's since January. Yeah. So it's hard to say when March, that we've seen over 1.5 million net new devices show up on RDP shares. Yeah. So, I mean, these are obviously marks of desperate, times to call for desperate measures, but there are acceptable risks and unacceptable risks to take. And we were, thinking that those were more towards the unacceptable side, and there were alternate solutions that people could come up with. And now that initial technology triage is kind of, on the ebb now, I mean, meaning, most people have either figured it out or they didn't figure it out.
Right.
Now it's like, okay, did we catalog all these risks? Did we, how did we approach each of these risk functions? And then how do we go back and now start assigning controls to each of these additional risks that we did? In some cases, those are pretty easy to manage. They didn't take too much additional risk, but in some cases where they had to use BYOD, meaning, they had to, use, their employees' home computers or home laptops or home iPads. And, what kinds of data streams got stored locally on those, what sorts of information is stored. And now we're all having to go back. And then where I eventually see it is now people start to look for how did we, expose the business process side of this, meaning, these things that we put on ourselves, like, corporate controls that said, for me to get this business transaction done, it needed to go from here, and then somebody manually moves over to this other person's desk, and then that person signs it, and then it has to be notarized. I mean, and these are just corporate control functions that, companies have had for many, many years. And then all of a sudden you can't do any of that anymore.
Right.
Try to get a notary to come to your house. It just doesn't work that way. And, so people will really start to change. And this is what I think, will be one of the more fundamental transformations, because technology only works in so many different ways. It's finite, and, you can, change your priority functions for it, but you can't, you can only do so many things with technology. But with business process, you can really fundamentally change how your companies work, and then start moving towards digital controls. And this is what I think the new definition of digital transformation will take on, is how to take all these manual controls that people have in place, and how do we put digital controls, and then what risks is that associated with those digital controls, and how do we mitigate those risks? Sorry, long-winded answer to your question.
No, that's totally awesome. I love that. So I wanted to touch on your comment about business controls or business processes. I mean, that's one thing that I don't think a lot of organizations really put a lot of thought into, and with good reason, they didn't really have the time to. But do you see possibly new technologies such as electronic signatures and other types of quote unquote convenience technologies kind of becoming more the norm with organizations, and what impact might that have on their overall cybersecurity stance?
Well, I mean, yes, I mean, those technologies will certainly get their day, and not that they aren't already having their day. I mean, many people use them already. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you think of not just, and how you do, business to business transactions, but also, how consumers do transactions, like, many states where you have to physically be in an office to actually sign for a house, or,
Mm-hmm.
These kinds of things is where I definitely think people will be reviewing. Some are regulatory, though. I mean, some require wet signature, and those will have to be assessed and evaluated. I mean, you even think of, Congress, which had to come back to DC today. That I imagine they're a little scared.
Yeah.
I know I would be. And, they actually talked about, trying to, could we do everything electronic remotely? And, things like the Constitution kind of get in the way of those things, where, you have to really look at those fundamental aspects, and then what can you build off those fundamentals? What has to be done, and then what controls need to be in place for that? What sorts of risks do you expose yourself to by using those? What sorts of additional components come into play? And then we have to mitigate those risks. And, businesses take on risks every day. I mean, we're all in the business of doing that, but we're all in the business of managing those risks. So it's just assessing, like, how does that expose you based on your business, and what other business controls that you have? What additional risks does that apply to my business? And then how do I think of other technology controls that can help me mitigate that? And, within business process, that's where you get into, there's a myriad, there's unlimited sets of controls that you can put in place with that. But you're just using technology functions to assign to those. And, I'm interested to see the creativity, because, I mean, honestly, we all got caught here with a lack of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning we just never saw this kind of problem. We always kind of said, well, I mean, we may be down for a couple of days, or it may be a terrorist event, or it may be but something localized. Nobody really, thought of, like, well, what if none of us could go to work for several months? That just never really came up in most people's thought patterns. And they usually said, well, if that happened, well, we're all in a world of hurt anyway.
Exactly.
So
The
we
world's
just, we
on
just
fire.
never,
Forget it.
yeah, we just never came up with situations. But you
Right.
see many companies that, you know, had adopted many forms of digital transformation, whether or not that was through SaaS application functions, to where they could scale up and down much easier than, you know, companies that had hybrid cloud models or still in just traditional, you know, private data center functions where everything was secured, you know, based on geographic controls as opposed to digital controls. So anyway, sorry.
No, don't apologize. It's great. So, you know, my next question has to do with these, you know, just the fact that we have had every company, basically every company has had to change the way that they do business to be able to survive during this. But do you think that these companies are kind of taking the tack of looking at this as much as a learning experience as it is as much a survival experience? I mean, do you think that companies are going to kind of take away lessons learned from this, and so the next time, and I think we all pretty much agree there is going to be a next time, you know, what they can do better, faster, and to keep their employees even more productive?
I certainly hope so. I mean, I certainly hope people will take it as a learning experience, although the survival experience is very real to many people.
Right.
And so there's that aspect. And, you know, depending upon what vertical you're in, you know, it's even, you know, been more or less impactful there. I mean, you know, for, you know, the retail and the restaurant and hospitality industry, I mean, they're in survival mode, and how they can try to learn from this experience is a bit more limited than, say, like health insurance providers and financial providers, who are more trying to, okay, how do we, you know, broaden our resiliency? How do we think of different ways to, you know, adapt our revenue streams where, you know, many companies don't even have that option. It's like, I'm in the hotel business. If people don't stay in hotels, no matter how many lessons I learned, I can't really change that. So many people will take a lesson learned, and I do see some fundamental shifts that'll come out of this. You know, this is just personal opinion, but I think things like telehealth and telemedicine will, it's not that those haven't been around before, but they've only kind of been, you know, like the last page in our benefits handbook. You know, now I think those will be the first page in our benefits handbook. When you think about it, who really likes going to a doctor's office or to a hospital? I know I don't. And if I can accomplish what I want to over you know, Zoom and or, you know, a convenient platform to do it, I would much rather do my, you know, my healthcare needs that way, if I can, you know, keep it secure and everything stays the same. Yeah. So I think that those kinds of lessons there are hard learned lessons, but they will be done. But, you know, there are certain industries that are just more, you know, sensitive to this kind of pandemic, and some will just have to learn how to survive.
Yeah, I agree, and you know, I think we all agree that we're going to see a second surge of this, whether it's, you know, 3 months from now or 6 months from now. But I know you have you kind of put together some tips that you think organizations should keep in mind to kind of shore up their security for the remote workforce.
Yeah, we put together several checklist functions from work from home, and then threats to the work from home environment that hopefully, you know, people can use as a guide to be able to make themselves safer and reduce those risk footprints that we've talked about here.
All right, great. So when do you think we're going to see that second surge? What's your opinion?
I
kind of feel like I need to like start like placing bets. Is it going to be September, October, November?
You know, I mean, again, not being a medical expert,
right,
you know, as far as the it is concerning to see that, you know, maybe we're opening too early. I don't know. I mean, I hope not, because I know how tired my personal family is of you know, staying at home every day, all day. Yeah. But I hope we can work our way through it. I mean, as far as the technology aspects of it go, I think we're going to be in a much better spot. And like I said, I think, you know, most people have figured out how to get people to work from home, but it'll be really so for, like, say, retail. How can they convert over to online, you know, from brick and mortar to online very quickly? And I think they've at least made those decisions, but how can they live and survive and adapt to that and being an online? And do you create it yourself, or do you attach to Amazon? You know, I mean, things like that are very real to people.
Yeah, those are definite questions that organizations, retail definitely, but even even restaurants in where I live, they so many have had to resort to doing online orders, or they were never equipped to do. So they're being very creative in the way that they do that, but I think they are learning the lesson that they need to have that online aspect of their business if they're going to survive. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of changes happening over the next few months. Definitely. And I hope that, the next time we do this, that organizations will be even more prepared and even safer especially for their employees working from home.
I hope so. I know I've changed some of my mindsets, and hopefully I think many other people have.
Yeah, great. Well, Todd, thanks so much for taking the time and talking with me. Really do appreciate it. Appreciate your expertise.
No, great. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, stick around. We've got much more TechStrong TV coming up, so please stay tuned.
Hey everyone, Alan Schimmel, CEO, founder of MediaOps here. I want to personally invite you to join us on June 4th for 12 hours strong of TechStrong. TechStrong Con is our conference that we're putting together. The tech industry is so built, and it was such an integral piece of our conferences, communicating, collaborating, networking, seeing your friends in the industries, your peers. And just because we can't get together in person anymore, we can certainly do it virtually. We've been doing virtual events at MediaOps for 2 years. We think we've got them down. It's a really immersive experience. But what I'm really excited about with TechStrong is, my friend John Willis, my partner in Digital Anarchist, John's put together an amazing lineup of speakers. I think unlike virtual DevOps, cloud native, DevSecOps, or cybersecurity related conference before. Check it out. Go to techstrongcon.com. Registration, attendance is free, but space is limited. We hope to see you there. It's 12 hours all day, June 4th. techstrongcon.com. Stay well, stay healthy, stay strong. TechStrong.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Welcome back, everybody, to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps, and I'm here now with Rachel Stockton, who is the Senior Director of Product Marketing at LogMeIn, and we are going to talk about the LastPass report that came out called The Psychology of Passwords. Sounds like a fascinating topic. Thanks for joining me today, Rachel. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about the report. What are some of the highlights that you guys found?
So we at LastPass have been doing this report for about 3 years now. And we find passwords, well, it's our business, but to be so interesting because there's so much emotion and challenge behind them at times for individuals. Passwords stand between us and the information that we're getting at. And we also know that they can be fraught with risk. Mm-hmm. So what we really discovered in this report is that the concept of cognitive dissonance, the idea that I know what I should be doing, but I'm going to do something different, mm-hmm. is ripe when it comes to passwords. Mm-hmm. We found, I think it was 91% of people say they should not reuse passwords. They understand that. And 66% of them still are. We all have those things in our life. Ben and Jerry are close friends of mine too, but it's that dissonance that is so interesting. And really understanding why are people still feeling this way?
So I guess the question really is why. I mean, what did you guys find? Is it a matter, are people just lazy, or are people just too afraid that they're going to forget their password and they'll never be able to log on to that site again? Or what's the reasoning behind it?
I think there are a few different things. I think one of the first things is we totally underestimate our risk. I'm one person, I have a lot of information out there, but I'm not, I don't have millions and millions of dollars. Why me? Mm-hmm. We forget that it isn't about us. It's actually about a huge, I know, oh my gosh, what? It's about a huge amount of people at once. And hackers are going in there harvesting huge amounts of data, and you're one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are not protecting that password and being smart, then you're making that risk higher. So I think that's one. I think another one is we do like control, right? So if we take that concept of, if I have to give all of my passwords over to a tool like LastPass, I lose control. I want to know the password. They're afraid of forgetting that information. Mm-hmm. But at that same time, people are still like saying they're going to be memorizing passwords. So more than 50% of people say that they are still going to memorize their passwords. And what we found is that on average, people have 40 different accounts as a consumer that they're accessing. And so that's a lot of passwords to remember. And then they do that by reusing them. Mm-hmm. I have a dog, Fiona. So one password could be Fiona, Fiona 1, Fiona 2. And I'm not going to say that's lazy, but if you look at I'm going to memorize as the way you're approaching it, it's really the only way.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I would imagine a lot of that is compounded by the fact that we're moving swiftly to, especially with this kind of new work from home paradigm that we're all living in, a lot of business applications are now web-based. And so you're compounding those consumer applications that folks need to log on to with the business applications and kind of mixing the two. And I imagine that creates an even higher security risk that both consumers and businesses need to be aware of.
Yes, I think already we saw a lot of blending of work and personal in life as people were normally working from home or doing work at night and things like that. But now, as we've really transformed how we work, the concept of shadow IT coming in, people bringing in more apps, less control over what you're able to access at the moment, and even just more online applications as individuals that we're using to find new ways to get food delivery or other things that we had in real life coming virtually. I think it really is compounded. And one of the things that we find really important is this concept of multi-factor authentication. So, not only just a password, but adding a layer on top. Something you might know, something that you might have, or something that you are, like biometrics.
Mm-hmm.
On a good note of the cognitive dissonance is that we have found that people are more people are using multi-factor authentication in their consumer life. But on the business side, we actually found that only about 37% of them are using it for work. So I think that it's really a call to organizations that as your workforce is now more distributed and realistically not going to go back to normal, probably ever, that we really have to make sure we have that second layer so that even if there is a data breach, you know that nothing can really happen with those passwords.
So you actually just answered two questions that I had for you. And one was about multi-factor authentication. So thanks for that. We've been hearing a lot about multi-factor authentication and other types of authentication as well. So it's good to hear that consumers are understanding the benefits of kind of at least the two-layer security for their accounts. But why do you think that businesses have not been as quick and accepting, if you will, of multi-factor authentication or other types of two or more factor authentication methods?
I think that it really probably depends a lot on the business industry as well as the size. As we look across businesses, we do see larger organizations employing them more. But as we look at smaller organizations, you have smaller IT staff and still that huge list of things that have to get done. So one of the big challenges with MFA has always been balancing that concept of security with usability. So being able to ensure that whatever you deploy is something that's really easy for your employee to use. And I think we really have made great strides in the past several years with that, with biometrics, with push authentication, and also just with, we always talk about the consumerization of IT, the fact that we can log into our phones with our well, it used to be our face, but now with the masks, it's harder. But, with our fingerprint or our facial recognition has really made that mainstream. And that's going to do nothing but benefit organizations who want to roll this out. People now know how to do it. They do it every day. My 10-year-old daughter does it with her new phone.
Yeah, it's true. It's and I also think that younger people are a little more attuned to it. They're used to it, so they're a lot more accepting of the technology than perhaps some older people who maybe consider it an invasion of privacy to have, your fingerprint or your iris or something that is so personal, but is being used as an authentication type. So I think it's really interesting to see how the younger generation in general works with technology, but specifically with password technology, authentication methods. So what do you think that consumers and businesses are doing right when it comes to passwords?
Well, I think number one, awareness is really important. So I'm really glad education is there, but I do think that they, on a consumer side, need to let go of that concept of control a bit. There are, here at LastPass, we have